The Miami Dolphins finished the 2024 season with an 8-9 record and missed the playoffs for the first time since 2021. And despite an 8-9 record not sounding terrible on paper, it was a long year for the Dolphins as they started out just 2-6 through their first 8 games before winning 6 of their next 8 games, only to lose to the Jets in Week 18 with a score of 32-20. We know now that even if they defeated the Jets in Week 18, it would not have mattered because they also needed the Broncos to lose to the Chiefs backups, which did not happen as Denver beat the Chiefs in Week 18 38-0. Regardless of the Dolphins needing help to get into the postseason for what would have been the third straight year, I would imagine mostly everyone watching this video am under the belief that even if they got into the postseason and played Buffalo in the wild card round, that all they would have been doing is extending their season by 60 minutes. And when you look at decisions this franchise has made over the past few years, the Miami Dolphins' future scares me, and it's not just a Tua thing the way some people want to make it out to be either. Yes, he plays a part, but in today's video we're going to break down why the Dolphins' future isn't pretty, and realistically what they can do to improve their team to try and finally win a playoff game for the first time since all the way back in 2000. And there is a lot to break down with this team, and without further ado, let's begin. And we are starting today's video by discussing one of the biggest problems heading into the 2024 season with the Miami Dolphins, and it's how their roster was constructed. Obviously, not every team heads into the year with the same level of expectations as others, but the Dolphins headed into the 2024 season with back-to-back postseason appearances and were 11-4 at a point during the 2023 season. They had 8 games in which they scored 30 or more points in 2023, and not surprisingly, they were 8-0 in those games. The 2023 Dolphins offense was very fun to watch as Tua led the league in passing yards, finished top 5 in passing touchdowns, and Tyreek Hill had his second straight 1,700-yard season and became the only player in NFL history to accomplish that feat. So heading into 2024, expectations, at least for the offense, were high. They earned that. Whatever you think of the Dolphins, whether it's they're a solid team but can't beat great teams, or a good offensive team, or whatever the case may be, they earn the right to have high offensive expectations heading into this year. But one of the biggest reasons why they failed to reach expectations in 2024 was because they had 2 critical pieces of the offensive line leave between 2023 and 2024. Those 2 guys were, of course, guard Robert Hunt, who signed a $100 million contract in free agency to go sign with the Panthers, and center Connor Williams, who unfortunately tore his ACL late in the 2023 season and eventually signed with the Seattle Seahawks before retiring midway through the 2024 season. Guys leave in free agency every year. It happens. But one of my biggest frustrations with general manager Chris Grier was clearly seeing a hole in the roster and basically choosing not to address it. The Dolphins started Liam Eichenberg at right guard to replace Robert Hunt, and Liam was a second-round pick back in 2021 who has played every spot along the offensive line for the Dolphins over the past 4 years, none particularly at a high level. They also started former undrafted free agent Robert Jones, who also wasn't great, and signed center Aaron Brewer in free agency to a 3-year $21 million deal. Now, for clarity, technically Chris Grier did address the offensive line by bringing in Aaron Brewer, but he's not a great center, and what I would say is this: if Brewer was that good of an offensive lineman to begin with, he would not have left the Titans building, and the reason for that is good offensive linemen rarely leave. There's obviously exceptions, and Trey Smith of the Chiefs will be one this offseason, but that's because of how loaded the rest of the roster is. The point of bringing up Trey Smith is to show it's rare, and in the case of Robert Hunt, I think he is a good player, but I don't think he is a $100 million player, and Robert Hunt did the normal thing a person would do if he was offered a $100 million contract. He asked where to sign, and that was that. So with an interior offensive line of Robert Jones, Aaron Brewer, and Liam Eichenberg, the Dolphins predictably took a substantial step back from 2023 to 2024. They were first in yards per carry as an offense in 2023 as they averaged over 5.1 yards per attempt, but in 2024 they fell all the way to 28th and averaged just 4.0 yards per carry. They had more games with less than 100 yards rushing in 2024 than they had games with 100 yards rushing this year, and whether Tua played all 17 games or not, to me, does not make that much of a difference because I don't think the results change in a big way. You can certainly argue they win the Week 7 Indy game in which they lost 15-10 10 in what was one of the regular season games in 2024, but the end result doesn't have this team going from 8-9 to running the table if they win in Indy with a healthy Tua. And to be completely honest, I think they have a lot more issues than just fixing a few spots along the offensive line. One of the biggest problems with the Dolphins is their quarterback situation is not as good as other teams across the AFC, like the Josh Allens, Lamar Jacksons, Joe Burrows, and Patrick Mahomes of the world. Tua is a solid starting quarterback. He's not bad, obviously, and he led the league in passing yards in 2023 for a reason. But he's definitely not on the level of the other four guys in the AFC, and also I think it's worth mentioning that CJ Stroud and the Texans, despite going through their struggles, have a really good defense led by Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter, and have a lethal secondary led of course by Derek Stingley Jr., and the Dolphins didn't even make the playoffs this year. Now you can point to whatever you want, whether it was injuries, whether it was the offense not performing to the level they did in 2023, whatever the case may be. Even if Tua was healthy for all 17 games, I don't think the Dolphins would have won the AFC East, and I definitely do not think they would have won 3 straight games against premier AFC teams to get to the Super Bowl, and that's going to be one of the biggest problems heading into 2025 and 2026 for that matter too, is can the Dolphins win 3 straight playoff games to get to the Super Bowl? Because ultimately I don't think they will be the number 1 seed. I would almost always, before the season started, think that the Chiefs, Ravens, Bills, Texans, or Bengals would all have better shots at the number 1 seed than the Miami Dolphins. Now, that's not a hot take, nor do I think it's a hot take, but there's a lot of problems within the Dolphins locker room, and I think it goes back to the Week 18 loss against the Jets, in which they lost 32-20. After the game, Tyreek Hill was interviewed in a post-game press conference and said that, quote, "I'm out, bruh, I have to do what's best for my family and I," end quote. And for Tyreek Hill to say that in that situation, for a player who is a veteran, not a rookie that just experienced his first difficult loss in the NFL, but for an 8 or 9 year vet who has suffered through several tough postseason losses, and even a Super Bowl loss for that matter, and multiple postseason with the losses, is not a good look. It's not a good look to make a situation about yourself in which the team just underperformed, not just in Week 18, but really throughout the entire 2024 season, and I think that's more of a locker room issue than some people would probably like to admit. Shannon Sharpe and Chad Ochocinco said on Nightcap that they were discussing how Mike McDaniel was handling players being late for meetings, and that Mike McDaniel basically said, "We are handling it the way that we can, and we are fining guys, and that we are doing what we have to do as an organization to reprimand players for being late for meetings," and that is not a good sign. I don't think you would ever have to question whether Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, or Lamar Jackson are strolling in the 9 o'clock meetings at 9:15, and that Lamar is basically saying to John Harbaugh while strolling in front of the team 15 minutes late that, "You know, coach, I'm a 2-time MVP. Charlie Kohler, you're a 3rd-string tight end. You need to pay attention to this, buddy. I'm a 2-time MVP, so I'm good. I know what I'm doing, but you guys need to pay attention." That is not a good look. And even if you are fined $1,100 and you are getting paid $30 million, to compare that to a $50,000 salary, that is about $1.83 to give you an idea of what an $1,100 fine would be if that's what they are fining Tyreek Hill for being late to meetings. That is not a good look. And Shannon Sharpe also pointed out that if players are being late to meetings this year, this is not something that just started in 2024. We're now in year 3 of Mike McDaniel as the Dolphins head coach, heading into year 4, and if players are late to meetings, this isn't something that just started this fall when they were 8-9 and in a tough season. This is probably something that started back in 2022, maybe even 2023, when they were winning games and made the playoffs, and it was kind of excused because, hey, we're winning, we're doing what we have to do, and it's not that big of a deal. So when you have a player make a post-game press conference entirely about himself, and then when you have guys consistently showing up late to meetings to the point where the head coach has to address it in a press conference, is not a good look. So when you factor in that the Dolphins have a roster that's already not that good, and that they don't have a lot of cap space entering 2025, and that you have a GM who is pretty much by every definition on the hot seat, and a head coach that may have already lost the locker room, I don't see how this isn't a bad situation all around. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I think the Miami Dolphins are in a bad situation moving forward. Another big reason why the Dolphins' future scares me is something that's entirely out of their control, and it's who's in their division. It was unfortunate luck they were in the same division as Tom Brady and Bill Belichick and the Patriots during their reign, but Miami really didn't do a whole lot in terms of unseating them over a span of 20 years. But now we're in the middle of Josh Allen's prime, and the Bills have won the AFC East in every year since 2020. We are halfway through the decade, and really for that matter, a quarter of the way through the 21st century, and Miami has a grand total of 2 division titles, one of which was in the year 2000 and one of which was in 2008. They are 1-6 in playoff games since the year 2000, but having Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills in the same division is a problem for Miami because they're not going anywhere. Miami has beaten Buffalo once since the start of the 2019 season, and I know Dolphins fans like to get their jokes in on social media to Bills fans regarding the fact that Buffalo has 0 rings, but it's not like Miami is even close to competing for a ring, and they are one of the most successful franchises year in year out, Buffalo that is. The Patriots obviously had a tough 2024 season as they finished with a 4-13 record and will have a top 5 pick in the 2025 draft, but I'll be honest, I like the Patriots outlook quite a bit, and it's due in large part to Drake May. Drake May threw 15 touchdowns to 10 interceptions in his rookie year, and if they develop Drake May the way he should be developed, and also get him a proper supporting cast, I think there is a really good chance he throws for at least 25 or 26 touchdowns next year, if not more. May also ran for over 400 yards in 2024, along with 2 rushing touchdowns, and my comp for May in the draft process last year was a blend between Josh Allen and Justin Herbert, and that's a comp I stand by 1 year later. Josh Allen is a unicorn in the sense of how reckless he plays, along with a combination of making Madden type plays, as cliche as that sounds, whereas Justin is a drop back passer that quietly has wheels and can get out and make plays out of the pocket if need be. I don't think Drake is anywhere close to as risky as Josh Allen is as a runner, but he is a problem, and the Patriots have a lot going for them if they nail this offseason. And what scares me for the Dolphins is I think there is a very real chance the 2025 Patriots offense will have new players like Ronnie Stanley from the Ravens, T. Higgins from the Bengals, and even Teteroa McMillan from the University of Arizona. Miami did sweep New England in 2024, but the biggest part in today's NFL in terms of being set up for long-term success is having a quarterback to build around. That way, when money gets in the way of other players and you have to move guys around, like how L'Jarius Sneed and Tyreek Hill have left the Chiefs over the past few years, you still have the quarterback in place to be able to seriously compete. And I think Drake May's ceiling is very high, and they should be around for years to come. As boring or as dismissing as this is to say, the Jets are unfortunately the Jets, and I have a lot of questions about their future, and I think they will be limited with what they'll be able to do as long as Woody Johnson is the owner, and we saw that in a big way this year. Even with that being said, the Jets embarrassed the Dolphins in a Week 18 must-win game for Miami with a score of 32-20. Yes, you can say Tua Tagovailoa didn't play in that game, and you would obviously have a valid point, but Aaron Rodgers having his best game of the year in what was a circus of a season for the Jets doesn't exactly inspire me to think the Dolphins have a bright future ahead of them, especially with one team already being 5-time defending division champions and another in New England who is clearly on the rise and has a good young quarterback, along with over $120 million in cap space this offseason. We have criticized the Dolphins' offense and coaching throughout this video, but one thing I really do like about the Dolphins is their defense. They finished 10th in points allowed per game in 2024, and I think Anthony Weaver is a future head coach. Zach Sealer is also one of the best-kept secrets in football, and Dolphins fans, of course, know that. And Chop Robinson also had a really good rookie season. Now, Jared Verse of the Rams obviously gets a lot of love as he finished top 5 in pressures amongst all players in 2024, and rightfully so. He will probably win the defensive Rookie of the Year, but Chop Robinson had over 55 pressures and had a really good rookie season, despite being labeled as a project player coming out of Penn State. One thing I do worry about with the 2025 Dolphins is how Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips are going to play coming off of injury, and Jalen had 2 season-ending injuries in a row, and I think that is absolutely worth noting for a player who already had injury concerns in his pre-draft process all the way back in 2021. I think the Dolphins defense, especially up front, has some talent. Now, I do worry worry a bit with the secondary, as Javon Holland is a pending free agent. Jalen Ramsey has been in the league for a long time now, and I also worry about the future of Anthony Weaver because I think he is a future head coach. So I think there's a very real reality where 2025 is his final season with the Dolphins, and you can argue that's a good thing to have, and that's a good problem to have, because if you have a bad defensive coordinator, then you're going to have to fire him, and then you have to worry about underperforming. So I don't worry about that with the Dolphins, but what I do worry about is that this team is going to play well defensively, and that they're going to probably be a top 10 or 12 unit in 2025, like they just were in 2024. But at the end of the day, the big question for me is, for what? Are they going to win a playoff game for the first time in 25 years? Is Mike McDaniel going to lead this team to multiple playoff wins? And I think the answer to that is no, and I don't think that should be a hot take either. They, to me, are in a very weird situation because they chose to pay Tua Tagovailoa, and I get it. If you have a quarterback that's remotely close to above average, which Tua absolutely is, you have to pay him because, as we've seen with quarterbacks throughout the 2024 season, not just with Miami, but with several other teams, you can do a lot worse at the quarterback position than Tua before you can get better, and that's one of the toughest positions for a franchise to be in. And the Dolphins are in a pretty difficult situation because I really don't know what the answer to this is. I don't think they're going to tear it down and try and rebuild because there's a very good chance that they would finish 7-10 or 8-9 again before they would finish 12-5 or 13-4 and really have a chance to win the AFC. And when you're in a division with Josh Allen, and when you're in a division with Drake May and now Mike Vrabel and potentially the Jets, we'll see on that one, this is one of the most difficult situations in all of football because I really don't know what the answer is for how they get better and how they get over the hump. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, please like and subscribe, as only about 45% of people watching are subscribed and helps the channel tremendously. Until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.